Welcome to another episode of Euphoric, the podcast. You guys, yesterday was my 8-year soberversary. So I've been celebrating 8 years alcohol-free. And it's so funny because I knew I'd always get here, obviously. But I started sharing about how incredible it is to live alcohol-free, how to change your relationship with alcohol back in my first year. And I remember there were these leaders who were already 5 years alcohol free. Maybe one I remember being 8 years alcohol free already at that point. And I was just like, oh, damn, that commands a lot of authority and a lot of respect. Now, like I said, I knew what I'd always get here, but it does feel so good to know that everything I've been teaching this entire time, everything I've been sharing about how to lose the desire to drink, it all works. It all works, and we're just going to continue on. I couldn't even be tempted by alcohol if you tried at this point, right? And it just feels so cool to have such a huge life change this way, not just because about the alcohol, right? And I think I want to share before I even get into this podcast episode that if you want to help other people, if you want to share about what it looks like to go alcohol free, to stop drinking, to drink less, it's never too early. Because if you really have that conviction, if you really know that you found something that is so worth sharing with people, that really, really is working for you, I feel like the passion at the beginning is actually what's going to help you share it out even more. So don't ever let something like that hold you back. But today I wanted to focus this episode on the 8 things that I've learned 8 years alcohol free. Now, obviously, this is going to be a very philosophical episode. We're going to go pretty deep into some things, but we're also going to keep it pretty bite-sized so that we can really, appreciate each one and obviously move on. So 8 years alcohol-free, and I really would be remiss if I also didn't recognize that it's not just my soberversary. It is going to be 5 years since my grandmother passed. So that is something that also is just so near and dear to me because she actually chose my soberversary as the day to leave this planet. And, my grandmother was almost 98 when she left. So it was definitely an intentional choice. And I definitely know it was a signal to me, which I'll get it into in just a moment. All right, so let's go into the 8 lessons that I've learned 8 years alcohol free. The first one is that going alcohol free, even just getting the nudge to want to drink less and want to reduce alcohol, want to, remove and reevaluate your relationship with alcohol, it is not about the alcohol. It is literally the mechanism that the universe uses to wake you up to your bigger purpose. It is the change that the universe is trying to guide you into because it knows that when you make this change, it really will unlock what you came to this planet to do. And, obviously I'm going to use my own story to illustrate this point, but I have seen this play out countless and countless times with the women that I work with. And I think it's so cool to just notice that I was so blocked in purpose before I removed alcohol. And it doesn't mean that I was aimless. I had ambitions. I already had an MBA. I was rising up in my career. It wasn't that I was just struggling so much before alcohol was out of the picture, but that die hard sense of passion and just fiery conviction and just being alive to my life's mission, it didn't exist before that. But I definitely got hints. I definitely got clues. I knew, for example, I always wanted to write a book. I was starting to get the feeling the last few years that I was drinking that I would be happier as an entrepreneur and that I should launch my own business. But I didn't really have the impetus to go after any of that kind of stuff. Alcohol really blocked me from making the big moves that would have really changed my life. And so I know that for me, going alcohol free was the biggest initiation I possibly could have had to really, really go for it. Now, the thing with purpose is it's one of those words that it's thrown around so much. Find your purpose, unleash your purpose. It almost sometimes feels meaningless, but you know when you have it and you know when you don't. You know what I mean? When you wake up every single day with this fiery conviction, with this mission that you couldn't not work on, with this sense that your life matters and that it's going to leave a legacy and that you're really here to eke out everything that you can out of this life, that's that feeling of purpose. And it's so important, Japanese are rumored to live so long because even when they retire, they have that ikigai, that sense of purpose. In fact, it's so important that I'm going to invite you right now to a workshop that I'm hosting on March 5th. It is called Hot Fiery Purpose. And I'm going to go over the exact framework that have used with hundreds of clients now and have taught many of my coaching students on how to help you elicit the most specific, unique, individual purpose that you came to this planet to express. And it all revolves around, this new alcohol-free chapter that you're embarking on and why the universe really set you up to find that purpose as you're going alcohol-free. Because trust me, you don't go alcohol-free for no reason. To me, and I wholeheartedly stand behind this, it is the way that the universe shows you how big of a purpose you actually have. When you decide to eliminate alcohol out of your life, it is the universe preparing you for a life filled with massive purpose. Because you just don't have time doling it with a beverage. You don't have time to show up less than anything than your most magnanimous, creative, zone of genius self. And so I know that when someone is deciding and debating and, really stepping into this lifestyle, I'm like, oh my gosh, let's get ready, because that is the huge step and foray into the bigger expression of what they really came to this planet for. And again, I'm talking about like such big things, like what you really came to this planet for. I mean, doesn't that change? Can't that mold and adapt depending on what decade you're in? Of course, right? Of course it changes. And that's why sometimes what your purpose was in your 20s isn't what your purpose is in your 40s, right? But it's so important to always have a process to get convicted into what that next chapter looks like for you. And especially if you're listening to this podcast and you have decided to eliminate alcohol, or you're on that journey, or you've already done it, good signs for you, because you know that that is why. The universe has literally prepared you. This is the biggest initiation that you could ever have. It wasn't really about the alcohol at the end of the day. All right, the second lesson that I've learned 8 years alcohol-free is that the alcohol-free brain scramble is a sacred window of time. Okay, let me explain what I'm talking about. So what happens when you go from being a drinker to a non-drinker is a huge scramble that happens in the brain. So much of your identity is wrapped around the idea of being a drinker. You go out and drink with your friends. You always say yes to a glass of champagne. You're always the one to order sake at a sushi restaurant, like whatever it is, right? And that is your identity, and it's pretty fixed for a long time. Most people don't just drink for a year or two, it's decades. And that, whether it's a party girl identity or like a wine snob identity or just someone who kind of likes to let loose or someone who always like whatever, they're different, right? They can be really different, but it is so much part of your identity. And so what happens is all of a sudden you decide to reevaluate alcohol, you're not drinking now, and your brain is like, what the hell is going on? I thought this person who we always were is who we're always going to be, right? And so you're basically confusing the hell out of your brain. The neural pathways that have been laid out, the habits that have been laid out, everything is getting shaken up because of this lifestyle change, right? And so what's really cool about this period of time is that now you can change anything. Anything. Literally, your brain is so confused during the alcohol-free scramble that anything else you believed about your identity is up for revaluation. So for example, I never used to think I was a morning person. You know what I mean? Like, nobody feels that great after waking up from drinking. I was always sleep deprived because I was never getting that REM sleep. Even though I didn't drink every day, I only usually drink on the weekend, still, I was always catching up to get that REM sleep. So waking up in the mornings never was pleasant to me, whether I drank the night before or not. And so I had this like fixed idea that I didn't like mornings, when really that was just the drinking version of me. That actually couldn't be further from the truth from the version of me that I am today. Now, I don't really love waking up super, super early, but I actually love mornings. It's my favorite time of day. I'm the most productive. I just feel the most alive. I'm totally a morning person. So you could see how, I can all of a sudden take all of these things I assumed about myself and scramble them up. And so this period of time, though, doesn't last very long. And that's where a lot of women make mistakes, is they go alcohol-free and they want to take it really slow. And they're like, okay, I'm healing, I'm processing, I'm adjusting. And then they get so used to the new normal that they miss the window of time to do the alcohol-free brain scramble. Because what happens is that You never thought you could be an author. Now you can. You never thought you could be an entrepreneur. Now you can. You never thought you could speak on stage in front of hundreds of people. Now you can. Literally anything that you once thought about yourself comes up to be scrambled, changed, and your brain is just going to accept it because so much change is already happening over there that it's like, okay, I guess we are that type of person now who gets on stage and speaks to hundreds of people. Take advantage of it. You don't want to miss out. I have seen people who've gone alcohol free and it's like nothing really changed because they didn't take advantage of this brain scramble. And then they were just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to see what happens, heal, peace out. And 3 years later, they have the same identity because they locked into that new normal. They're still not drinking, but they never took advantage of the brain scramble. So I'm definitely going to share more on my workshop on March 5th, Hot Fiery Purpose, about how to take advantage of that brain scramble. But it is a very sacred window of time. I want to say, obviously, there's no science behind this. I'm just saying this anecdotally, but I want to say the brain scramble is probably only lasts up to 2 years. Mostly it's the first year though. So you really, really want to take advantage of it. Okay, my number 3, the lesson I've learned on 8 years alcohol free is that your identity transforms on a cellular level. It really does. And it's so funny, but most of us, if we are going on this alcohol free journey, there's a version of us that drank, and that version of us is always going to be younger than us, right? And then there's the version of us who, evolves into this new identity, the version of us who isn't drinking. And just because the passage of time, you're never going to go backwards in time, that version of you is going to be the more mature, the more evolved version of you. But in my life, I see such a demarcation. My identity didn't just change from drinker to non-drinker, it changed in everything, literally everything. Like, I used to be a really jealous person. I used to be kind of petty and like feeling like, I don't know, I kind of got the short end of the stick in life type of thing. Let's just say I had a victim mentality. I was still a very optimistic person and a positive person. I wasn't like an Eeyore to be around, but I definitely expressed that victim mentality a lot. I didn't have the emotional capacity to handle a lot of things in my life. I didn't have a lot of vision. And so, like, for me, I can just see this like A and B, before and after version of me, the biggest one. And there's obviously been a lot. Like, the more you grow, the more you evolve, the more you're doing this personal development work, you're going to keep having that, evolved version of you. But for me, the biggest demarcation will always be from the drinking self to the non-drinking self. And it did change my identity on a cellular level. And I was able to take advantage of that alcohol-free brain scramble and create a brand new identity. And obviously there's parts of my personality that I've always had since I'm a little girl. I'm not saying that you like completely kill the old self and, morph only into this new self, but this is really promising because for the subconscious mind, it really just means that you can implant anything you want. And this goes back to my point before, is that you can become the type of person who does the things that you never thought you could do before. And that, I think, is what is so exciting about going alcohol free. It's not really about the fact that you don't drink or you're a sober person now. It's that any identity shift you want to make in your life is now possible for you because you have made this change. And it really goes down to the core of you. Because you have to remember, the drinking version of you is the socially programmed version of you. We don't come to this planet as babies and think to ourselves, we need to start drinking. Like, it is such a social program. So that is never truly the real version of you. That is only just responding to social programming. And what I've noticed is that so many people stop listening to social programming, not just around the drinking, but around so many other areas in their life, especially their career, their purposes, their missions, just what they want to do, how they want to express themselves in their lives. It's so cool to see. Okay, number 4, the fourth thing I have learned in 8 years alcohol free is that someday is the most dangerous word in your vocabulary. I was so filled of someday. And what I think is really why this concept is dangerous is because imagine a scenario where someone wants to go after, really big dreams, but they tell themselves, I can't do it. Now, that's sad, obviously, but that's like one case. Now compare that to an even sneakier case where someone tells themselves, or someone wants to go after big dreams, but someone tells themselves instead, I will do them, just not right now. I'll do that someday. I'm putting it off for a future time. What happens is that when you tell yourself you can't achieve your dreams at all, there's so much more to debunk. There's so much more to unpack there. There's so much more healing that can be done, right? There's really something to work with. But when you tell yourself that you'll just do it someday, you're not actually challenging yourself to change. You just like you're telling yourself everything is fine, all my healing is great, I have no fears, I have no doubts. I'm just putting that off for someday. And so it's the sneakiest self-deception that you can do. Now, I know I lived in the someday land for a long, long time. I had a lot of different goals that I put on the someday burner, right? Think of it as like a stove and you're just like putting it in the back burner. And someday never happened. And someday usually never happens for most people. When you tell yourself that you want to go after something and you say, I'll do that next year or the year after, why are you telling yourself that? Why aren't you going after that today? Now, there's one reason that's really valid is that you're already doing something really big right now that is already super aligned with your dreams and goals, and you literally just don't have the bandwidth to start another project. Now, that's fine, right? That makes a lot of sense. But a lot of times we just think that we aren't ready somehow, or we don't have enough skills, or we don't have the emotional capacity, or we just don't have what we really need is the conviction and the courage to actually go after it. And I have seen this play out. There have been so many clients I've worked with. There have been so many people I've just seen in the sober world. There's so many people that I've met in conferences. I have seen this play out with, hundreds of people that I've met over time. What happens when they tell me that they want to do something someday, but they're not making any progress on it today? It always fizzles. It always just goes blah, and it doesn't usually happen. And so challenge yourself. Anytime you hear yourself saying the word someday, ask yourself, why am I not making progress on this right now? Even if it's something like very logical, like I want to write a book, but I'm not going to write a book until 2027. That's great, fine. But why am I not already taking notes for my book? Why am I not already working on the outline? Why am I not already digesting and processing the idea? Basically, this someday is putting off something that is already coming to you. The universe is already showing you that you want to work on it, and it's giving you an outlet to do so. And then you're just like pushing it away and putting it on someday. It's not someday that you're going to become an amazing coach. It's not someday that you are going to, sell high ticket and be able to leave your day job. It's not someday that you're going to write a book. It's not someday that you're going to get on a stage or launch your podcast. It's freaking today. All right, let's go into number 5. The 5th lesson that I've learned in 8 years alcohol-free is that your environment is shaping everything. Now, I want to talk about this from the alcohol-free lens first. So when I decided to go alcohol-free, it's so uncanny how the universe works. But, when I was drinking, everyone drank. Everyone around me drank. My friends drank. I had different circles of friends. And anytime I would hang out with any one of those circles of friends, we would drink. I mean, it was usually in the evening, so it was all normal. It all felt like part of just what you do. And then all of a sudden I go alcohol-free, and that's not my normal anymore. So how the hell did that switch? Now, first of all, I didn't just leave all my friends behind. Sometimes it is appropriate to do that when you're really hanging out with only toxic people or only people that you have in common with is drinking. Is like, yeah, maybe it's time to find some new friends. But for the most part, I evolved. The drinking didn't become the center stage of the hangout anymore, and I welcomed in new friends into my world. And so I just remember a year, just 1 year into my alcohol-free life, and I already didn't have the environment of drinking around me whatsoever. Even like, okay, I'm not going to say like drinking was never around me, but it just wasn't the core surrounding the way it was before. Even when I was around my like family and like siblings who used to drink, we would all drink together. Maybe they were still doing that, but it just wasn't the same kind of feeling as before. It wasn't as dominant there. I also introduced so many other alcohol-free people into my life, so it just didn't feel like I was around so many people who were drinking really anymore. And now, 8 years later, like, I don't know, it's just not really a thing. Like, it's not just like oh, Fridays is the pressure because this happens. Like, I have totally switched up the way I socialize with people. Basically, it's just a non-issue. I don't even really think about it. You know what I mean? And what's interesting about that idea is that, you can do this for anything in your life. If you want to be a really successful entrepreneur, find a way to hang out with other really successful entrepreneurs. If you want to get on stages, hang out with people who get on stages. If you want to launch a podcast, hang out with other podcasters. If you want to move to France, go like Find people who are actively living in France, digital nomads, expats. Like, you will normalize the thing you want when you force that thing in your environment. And now force is a strong word, but you can just be strategic. You can just intentionally think to yourself, how can I truly surround myself with this to normalize it? And I think that that is one of the biggest things that we can do in our lives to actually affect the change that we want. Because here's the thing, I'm not going to go all into this in this episode, but your environment is always feeding into your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is always feeding into what feelings, behaviors, actions, results that you're going to get in life. So if you ever want to change something in your life, find the environment first that will really foster that and just watch it change. Like, there's so much power, for example, in joining a business mastermind. And yes, you're going to learn a lot from the mentor. There's going to be really in-depth trainings that you can apply. You're going to have like huge breakthroughs and expansions. But part of it is also being around the other people, being around and calibrating to that new level identity, that next level of goals and vision will change you on a cellular level too. It's like the fastest way to change is like, you don't even need to put in effort. You don't even need to do a lot of stuff. Just go hang out with people who are doing the thing that you want to do. Don't make excuses about it. Yes, sometimes you have to pay to play, but trust me, having that level of investment is actually a good thing because it puts skin in the game and you're going to be so much more likely to achieve it, right? Like, this is just what top elite players do. And this is something I've noticed in so many different spheres of my life as well. One thing that I want to do when, I know we've been trying, my husband and I, to have a child, and it's something that we've been working on for quite a long time, but I know it's going to happen. And I know I also want to have an alternative childhood for my child. We might want to settle down and live in a specific area for a long time, but we might also want to travel and have world school be part of our, world for like a year or two. And I know that's really different from how a lot of people raise their children. And so if I want to normalize that, and if I don't want to feel guilty about that, and if I want to find ways to really incorporate that into my life, I'm going to have to hang out with other parents who are doing world school. It's that simple. It's literally that simple, and that's how you make the change that you want to make. Okay, number 6. The 6th lesson I have learned on 8 years alcohol-free. Going alcohol-free is just the beginning, and it is the pathway for you to build the life you desire. I really do believe, and I don't say this because it comes easily, because it does not come easily, but I really do believe that going alcohol-free allows you to build the life you really want. I truly believe that the action, the function of alcohol in the first place, even when we're doing it from a happy place, excited, celebratory place, is to numb us to the fact that we're not living our dream life in the first place. And so when you remove alcohol from the picture, you get the withdrawal, you get the creativity, you get the intuitive download hits to understand, what is it that is actually going to make me happy? And why am I not actively pursuing that? And I believe because you've already gone through such a huge change, such a huge identity shift that I talked about earlier, you have everything it takes to build your dream life. Now, is this going to happen in the first few months? Of course not. Is it going to take years to build? Probably. But what else are you going to do with your life, right? Like, the time's going to pass by either way. And if I can just look back, there's still a lot of dreams I have in my heart. There's a lot of things I want to do. But the things that have happened to me in the last 8 years, the trajectory of my life 8 years ago compared to where it is today, what I've done, what I've accomplished, the most fulfilling experiences I've had, the people I've met, the growth I've had, it is my dream life. It really is. It is what I used to yearn for. And I created it. I built it every step of the way because of going alcohol-free. And I really do believe that you have this power. We all have this power. And again, it is worth going after. It is so worth it because you're going to notice areas in your life where maybe it isn't a 10 out of 10. But now you have the intentionality and the intuition to understand, well, what would make it at a 10 out of 10? And now you have the courage to actually build that every single day. And I think that's what living a valiant life really looks like, because you going after the biggest, dreamiest life that you desire is actually the way that the universe is orchestrating you to help the most people too. So it makes your life not just this flashy vision board thing. It makes it a life of impact and true, deep fulfillment. Okay, I could go on to that forever, but let's keep going. Number 7, being alcohol-free is your biggest competitive advantage. And so much of how you're going to grow is going to be tied to that original decision. Because in itself, drinking is this like stagnation. It's this like, I'm just going to settle, I'm going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And, going into this alcohol-free lifestyle is this huge departure into, no, I want growth, baby. I want to evolve. I want to have all my zone of genius about me. I want to have the deepest sense of creativity. And yes, obviously, you can go into the like, you're going to sleep better, your mornings, your energy, all that stuff. That stuff is really obvious. Obviously, it's talked about a lot in the sober sphere, but when you think about it in a deeper way, someone who is drinking versus you is not going to have as much creative downloads, is not going to get $1,000,000 ideas, is not going to get these like divine hits, these intuitive hits about what their life means and what they're supposed to do. Like, I think the real power in your competitive edge isn't just being a little bit sharper, a little bit more energized, a little bit healthier. It's none of that. It's this deep resonance that you have of like what you are here on this planet to do and the deep courage that you get to go after that. And it is your competitive advantage, and it's incredible to see. Personally, I don't hire coaches to work with me who drink. If you drink every once in a while, whatever, we're not going to like put you up to the test, but I don't hire people who regularly make alcohol a part of their lives because I just know their intuitive hits, their creative downloads, they're not going to be that high. Their breakthroughs are not going to be that high. And I don't want a person like that necessarily guiding me. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I don't mean that like, oh my gosh, someone who's drinking can't access all that and they're somehow behind. I just mean like the more powerful, deeper resonance is going to come from the person with the competitive advantage who's not drinking. And you see that time and time again, why successful people don't drink. So many of the leaders, authors, and entrepreneurs that we all admire are actually non-drinkers. All right, let's get into the last one. The 8th lesson that I've learned, 8 years alcohol-free, is that you are always being guided by signs. I love the idea of synchronicities where you start to feel, sense, or notice something coming to you as a sign or some repetitive thing that you keep seeing over and over again. And there's a lot of body of work into the idea of signs and synchronicities. But to me, without getting, too spiritual and too religious about it, is that there is something out there guiding us. And you could consider that the universe, you can consider that God, you can consider that your ancestors, you can consider that your higher self. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. But if you lean into it, you will pick up and notice. And I think there's so many signs that I got to go alcohol-free. Because for me, and what I believe is so many people's journey as well, is that you remove alcohol and that's what unlocks you into the deeper purpose. I wouldn't have been able to step into the purpose that I have today if I was still drinking, if I never made that decision to reevaluate alcohol. So I personally got a lot of signs to go alcohol-free. First, they're the negative signs, right? But then it was the serendipities, it was the synchronicities that I got, I mean, for example, speaking of my grandma at the beginning of the episode, she passed on my soberversary. Now, my grandmother was almost 98 years old. She had lived a very, very full life. It was bittersweet to lose her, but in a way, it was her time. There was no like, oh, she left too early. There wasn't that feeling, right? She lived a very complete life. And so when she left, I had already been preparing myself for her departure for a few years at that point. And the fact that she chose my soberversary as the day to leave this planet is so symbolic to me. I know what she's saying in that moment. I know that she is saying, this is the path. This is the path for you to change the most amount of lives. This is your purpose. This is your path. She left behind for me this amethyst, this huge amethyst. And my grandmother would wear amethyst all the time. It was like on her rings and her necklaces, earrings, like it was her favorite stone by and large. And she left this giant amethyst for me. And as soon as I get it, after she passes, I look it up And literally, the word amethyst comes from ancient Greek, which means not drunken, which means sober. Just uncanny things like that. And as I've gone through my journey, I have found so many different signs, whether it's a wildflower that I see, whether that it's a number that I'm seeing on the clock, whether there is a musical scene, or sometimes just looking at the stars. Like there have been moments where I have looked at the stars and the moon, especially in different parts of the world, where I just feel so immensely guided at that point. And I think if you really slow down and pay attention, you're going to feel the signs as well. First of all, you can always ask. You can always ask for a sign. And it's just really uncanny how that plays out. You can always feel in these moments when you're not sure what to do. You can go outside, you can look at the stars, and you can literally like just be silent and just feel and wait for that feeling to come up of what it's trying to tell you. And then there's those moments that it hits you out of the blue, right? And I just know, for example, that my grandmother went through so much in her life, so much hardship, barely surviving World War II, barely surviving having my grandfather in a concentration camp. He almost passed. A lot of my other family members were not so lucky. A lot of my great aunts and uncles did not survive just these horrible atrocities that happened during World War II and World War I. My family was in the smack dab middle of both of those, crazy, crazy events. And just thinking about the odds that like the family members that I am from, that what they had to do to survive is uncanny. Uncanny. And I know that they survived so that I could be here. And so that I could not just be here to live a mediocre existence. It's so that I could be here and actually fulfill my purpose. Actually go after the life and the legacy that I was meant to live. And it's not for some ego trip. It's not for me to be just the hero of my own journey, although that's amazing too. It is because of the impact that it makes in the world and what that does, the ripple effect for other people. And then other people can make the ripple effect for other people. And it just goes on and on and on until like we literally are changing the world. The consciousness of the world is changing. And just look at it. 8 years ago, going alcohol free was such an anomaly. It was such a weird thing. It was like, what happened? Right? Now it is the most popular thing you could do. Like we are so on the right side of history. Every doctor is on the bandwagon, right? So many studies come out all the time now how there's no safe amount of alcohol. Like, can you imagine if 8 years ago I was wrong? Can you imagine if 8 years ago I told you guys, hey guys, going alcohol free is going to be the next big thing. There's no safe amount of alcohol, but maybe I'll be proven wrong in a few years, and I actually was. Like, how funny that obviously no. Obviously I'm on the right side of history, and so are you, right? And we have seen the consciousness of the world change in that way, not just because of me, not just because another leader, hundreds, thousands of leaders, thousands of influencers, so many people speaking up about this life, that the consciousness of the world changes, cultural norms change. I can't even wait to see what's going to happen in 10, 20 years from now. But that is the life that your ancestors survived for so that you could make this much of a global change. And you can do that, obviously, I'm speaking about the alcohol-free example, but it can be in any area. It can truly be in any area. And so listen to the signs. Listen to the signs that you are meant to be great, that you are meant to do the big, beautiful dreams you have on your heart. The big, beautiful dreams are not selfish. They are literally how the universe guides you into achieving the things that are going to make the most impact for the planet and actually change the planet. And when you believe that, it stops being this selfish thing. You're just like, okay, I'm going to go for it. And I know a lot of times when we're in the growth world, we have been doing this work for a long time. We have been going after it. We've been going after it. But there's always that next thing that really scares us and something we're putting off and someday we're calling the someday for. And so I hope without anything else that this podcast episode really inspired you to mine deep into what you're labeling for someday and really start making progress on it today. Like, time is so short, life is so precious. You get to deserve the life that you really, really want and came to this planet for. So there we go, my 8 lessons in 8 years alcohol-free. I told you we're getting a little philosophical, but these are the things that really make Euphoric what it is, what's really shaped me the most over this time frame, just the lessons that I've learned, the things that I've seen time and time again in clients, and I hope that you could find a nugget there that was really inspiring and motivating for you as well. So wherever you are, have a wonderful week.